Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, December 9th, 2020. Time for me to intervene in the suits across the country. I don't know. Not yet before the Supreme Court. But we're asking very nicely, very, very strongly, in fact, for us to get our consideration before the Supreme Court. It's, I don't know, another day that we could throw away spending on what's happening in the courts, or exactly which courts are throwing which suits out from the Republicans in their attempts to overturn the elections. Let's see. Yesterday, what was this? Yesterday was Tuesday, so that was when Joan told us about Texas's suit against 4 other states attempting to do something that would something, blah, 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 Donald Trump is president forever. We'll discuss this a little bit, what they're up to, and the one-sentence denial of the motion in the Pennsylvania case brought by, what's his name? Oh, I don't know. I've already forgotten. Mark Kelly. Is that right? Is that his? No, not Mark Kelly, but Mike Kelly. The other Kelly with an M. Mark Kelly is the good one that got elected to the Senate from Arizona. Mike Kelly, I think it is. I hope I don't have it backwards. Anyway, the one that I'm talking about is the congressman from Pennsylvania who filed suit, and I don't think I ever really bothered to catch up on what you would tell students to look to. What are the merits of the case here? What are the arguments being made? But there are no merits to this case. So anyway, it was dismissed, or rather denied, for an emergency injunction by the Supreme Court in one line. The motion's denied, and that's it. Not signed. No sign of whether there was any dissent. It's not entirely clear. They wouldn't necessarily tell you in a memorandum like that. But it was as stark a denial as you get. It was one sentence. It's denied, and no detail about it. Largely because it was just a waste of everybody's time, honestly. But anyway, the Texas suit is coming, and I am aware that Donald Trump is tweeting about it now, saying that, he's going to be intervening in Texas's case against, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, for one thing. And he's also maintaining, as his lawyer Jenna Ellis insisted yesterday, that this wasn't the end of the Pennsylvania case. It was Jenna Ellis's position yesterday that, what the hell did she say? That, this denial of this emergency motion wasn't the same as denying certiorari, the right to, or a grant by the court of the right to argue your case, for that they would hear your case. But there's no pending petition for cert out there anyway, so I don't know. I mean, yesterday was Safe Harbor Day. Good luck getting the Supreme Court to take up your case before the deadline to get anything done. I mean, I guess if you're looking to overturn the entire constitutional scheme, I guess you could do it anytime. I don't know. Anyway, the important thing is they're doing a lot of dumb stuff in courts. And so, because we have available to us someone who is an expert at calling out dumb stuff that's happening in the courts, Armando will join us at about 9:30 or so to discuss some or all of this nonsense. Greg Dworkin won't be with us today, not just because we're pushing him aside for Armando, but rather, not at all because we're doing that, but some work going on at the house, a little noisy. Abby decided she was going to take over the airwaves if we granted access. If we had granted Greg certiorari to the program today, it would have been a lot like hearing these lawsuits. A lot of noise and no information. Anyway, here we go. Kagro in the Morning is live now. I'm told all the way from Portland, Maine today by our good friend Bill. By the way, I understand Bill, I don't know. You'll have to tell us whether you're preparing for this. I understand that there's a gigantic magnetic storm going on today. I don't know. Yeah, I didn't detect it or anything. I didn't like stick to the refrigerator when I went there. It was I was told to me by Twitter, so it's definitely true. But apparently the weather folks are on top of this big magnetic storm that will make it possible to view Aurora Borealis much further south than is usually the case ever, I guess, really. I don't know whether it's for the time of year or what have you. But so some of our northern tier states will have the opportunity to see this thing. And I guess it looks to be visible, not around here, unfortunately. I took a look around. But Maine, I would assume, because north and all that. And it looked like the line that they were predicting for this thing in terms of viewing came down, well down into upstate New York, for instance. So most of New England might actually have the chance to do this. Don't know whether it's going to be cloudy tonight or what a tragedy that would be. But trying to look, I'm thinking about looking at the map and seeing how long it would take me to drive far enough north to see this thing. But then what do I do once I've seen it? I'm stuck way up in the north and it's midnight and I don't know what to do. Of course, it does get dark early around here. Anyway, we'll be checking all of that out. We'll be checking in on the lunacy of the president, speaking of celestial events, and so much more. But let's take a look at what I've got tucked away in pocket, because there's a lot of it. We could have filled the show 100% to 200%, twice over, probably, even without having Armando come in. But let's see. What shall we pick up on? I mentioned, we mentioned yesterday, Joan brought up the outside letter, the petition of sorts, an open letter from 1,500 attorneys, as she let us know. And here, the report in the Washington Post on this thing, letter from 1,500 attorneys says Trump campaign lawyers don't have license to lie. We, of course, spoke with Joan about what she wrote up about this thing. I just thought I would at least point out the headline that Washington Post was using in this thing. Trump campaign lawyers don't have license to lie. And, so why don't we get rid of that license? And then they'll be lying on their own volition, and then we can do, I don't know what we do about that. But anyway, it's true and out there, and the Washington Post has got it covered, and I guess it's a little more relevant. I'll include it in the roundup today so you can read it and compare it to what Joan told you about it yesterday. And after we discuss what's happening in front of the courts today, I think, like I said, it'll be that much more relevant. Other lawyers elsewhere lodging their own protests. Here's a protest related to a story that I absolutely meant to get to yesterday and didn't because we were so busy, but you may all by this point have seen the story. And details on the story are a little sketchy in terms of exactly what happened and exactly who did what and on what basis. But let's see, do I have a pocket story on the underlying story? You would have heard about the action down in Florida where the data scientist who was formerly in charge of building the information infrastructure around Florida's COVID-19 tracking and reporting was originally fired essentially by Governor Ron DeSantis because DeSantis, as a Republican, wanted to do his best to cover up what was actually happening with COVID-19 in Florida because the numbers were terrible, his track record was terrible, and the Trump line on COVID-19 at the time, and still today, is that it's not an issue and not causing any problems, especially not in Republican states. So everybody go away. Well, Rebecca Jones was the name of this data scientist who, had the proof that things were otherwise than Ron DeSantis claimed, and he wanted her out of the picture and kicked her out of the picture. And now it turns out that in the months since, she has maintained her own website and disseminated information that she's managed to cull on her own so that people can figure out what's going on in Florida with COVID-19. And I guess eventually this has rubbed Ron DeSantis the wrong way. He needs to continue to be able to claim that by some miracle, the state with world famous for warehousing the elderly and vulnerable to COVID-19, was not having any problem whatsoever. Anyway, she was, I guess, telling a contrary tale, and he got fed up with it and apparently sent the state police to raid her house and seize her computer equipment. So it would be interesting to get to the bottom of exactly how this all went down, because you know how we are in this country. We like to have require warrants for such raids, and it's not entirely clear on what basis you would issue such a warrant, and this has become the story. So, as I said, there were lawyer protests about it. Here's, one lawyer's protest. GOP lawyer resigns over treatment of Florida data analyst. This is, we'll skip right to this phase of the story since I wasn't able to bring you the initial phase yesterday, but you heard about it. I am sure. Let's see. Subheader here from the Tampa Bay Times says Ron Filipkowski, a lifelong Republican who was appointed to the 12th Circuit Judicial Nominating Commission by DeSantis, a state judge thing for essentially recommending to him who should get state judgeships. He resigned Tuesday morning after reviewing the search warrant affidavit that the state used to seize computers and phones from Rebecca Jones. A very interesting twist on this stuff. Mary Ellen Klaas reporting this again for the Tampa Bay Times. A Sarasota lawyer resigned his appointment to the panel that picks judges on Tuesday to call attention to the way Governor Ron DeSantis has handled public access to truthful data and raiding of a data analyst's home. The raiding. Ron Filipkowski, a Marine veteran, former state and federal prosecutor, and a lifelong Republican who was appointed to the 12th Judicial Circuit Nominating Commission by DeSantis, resigned Tuesday morning after reviewing the search warrant affidavit that the state used to seize computers and phones from Rebecca Jones, the former Department of Health data analyst who has been running an alternative website to the state's COVID dashboard, which she originally built. Filipkowski, who is 52 and has served on the Judicial Nominating Commission for 10 years, twice appointed to the role once by, I guess, former Governor Rick Scott and once by DeSantis. Unless he was appointed twice by Rick Scott and once by DeSantis. Is that right? Yeah, okay. I don't know how long those terms are. Anyway, he called the governor's handling of the pandemic reckless and irresponsible. It's a good call. The recent events regarding public access to truthful data on the pandemic and the specific treatment of Rebecca Jones has made the issue a legal one rather than just medical. He wrote in a letter to the governor's general counsel, "I no longer wish to serve the current government of Florida in any capacity." Interesting. Filipkowski, who is also a former general counsel to the Sarasota Republican Party, said that although he has been increasingly frustrated by the DeSantis administration and its handling of the coronavirus crisis, the situation seemed political, he said. Then, on Monday, after Jones's home was raided by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement because it suspected her of sending a message to the Department of Health messaging system urging people to, quote, be a hero, speak out before it's too late, he told a friend something didn't seem right. The friend, a Trump supporter, suggested that Filipkowski read the search warrant affidavit filed by FDLE, and when he did, he said he was alarmed. I don't know if the Trump-supporting friend thought he was helping Trump's cause there, or he too is beginning to wake up to what's going on. What's the crime? Filipkowski now asks. The crime, allegedly anyway, is hacking into an email server to tell people the truth, he said. Well, you know, if you hack your way in, I don't know that you can get away with that. But he says, he says it's not a horrible crime, and I guess it's not. But then he says, if it's a crime at all, and who knows how things are in Florida. Well, Armando does. Maybe he'll know. So, I don't know. He may be off base here in saying that it's not a crime in some way. Although I'm not 100% certain she has to hack into the thing in order to send a message to people via email. I mean, I do that all the time, and I haven't hacked anybody for it. Anyway, he compared her situation to the legal doctrine called necessity, which allows someone to break the law to prevent a more serious harm. And I guess there is one here. If what she did is illegal, and he should know more clearly about that, it pales in comparison to the harm she was trying to prevent. Inspired by former Trump staff members such as Olivia Troy, Vice President Mike Pence's former Homeland Security advisor, remember her, and COVID task force member who resigned in September over the administration's handling of the pandemic. He decided now to resign from the Judicial Nominating Council, the JNC. Even though I was never happy with the way that DeSantis handled COVID, that is still separate and distinct from what I do on the JNC, he said. But this is different because now what you're doing is using police powers. You're using law enforcement in intimidating people who are trying to tell the truth, and now we're crossing over to my whole life as a prosecutor, employer, crusader. This is wrong. He's taking it to a different level. He said he hoped his resignation in my own little way could draw some more attention to it and to the plight of the people of Florida who I feel are not being told the truth about COVID. Filipkowski is not new to being a critic. He has written a letter to the editor of his hometown paper. Oh, look out for that. Urging people to enforce their own COVID restrictions and not patronize businesses that are not taking the virus seriously and letting their guard down. He also worked with the Anti-Trump Lincoln Project to support President-elect Joe Biden and has appeared in a video by the Center for American Progress Action Fund opposing Trump's reelection and accusing the president of politicizing the military and having a very strong authoritarian streak. This is all true, of course. Filipkowski said the hardest thing will be to face Joe Gruters, his friend and the chairman of the Republican Party of Florida, who recommended DeSantis appoint him to the JNC. I respect Joe, and I think he's an honest guy, and I think he might think this is not cool, he said. That's the only part I don't feel great about. Okay, so now we know how Filipkowski feels and what he feels great about and what he doesn't. I'm pretty sure somewhere in pocket here is another bit of the description of the situation here, but I guess it was not entirely clear whether there was a valid and usable affidavit available to the Department of Law Enforcement down there in Florida. I got another piece here. Here it is from Tallahassee Democrat. Might as well make this today's first segment. Agents, the basic factual reporting about the raid. Agents raid home of fired Florida data scientist who built COVID-19 dashboard. DeSantis, the subheader says, quote, sent the Gestapo. Video shows FDLE agents with guns drawn at home of woman fired over COVID-19 data. This written by Jeffrey Schweers in the Tallahassee Democrat newsroom. This is, this was, I think, the crux of the issue when Rebecca Jones was complaining about this on Twitter. Yeah, they did the whole, kick down the door and stick guns in everybody's face thing. Again, on the allegation that she sent some emails to people in the State Department of Health and maybe hacked her way in order to do it more easily. I don't know, to send it system-wide. Maybe something she remembered that she had access to from before when she was fired, and now it's an unauthorized access because she doesn't work for them anymore, and said, go out there and tell the truth about things. Anyway, state police brandishing firearms Monday raided the Tallahassee home of Rebecca Jones. You know who she is by now. She was, of course, fired over what she said was refusing to manipulate data. They pointed a gun in my face. They pointed guns at my kids, Jones tweeted shortly before 5 p.m. back on Monday. Jones, who launched her own COVID-19 dashboard after she was fired and used crowdsourcing to raise money to support it, said the agents knocked on her door around 8:30 a.m. that morning. I guess they didn't kick it in. There we go. Took all her hardware and tech after showing her a warrant based on a complaint filed by the Florida Department of Health. A video accompanying the post shows Florida Department of Law Enforcement agents in vests at the front door with guns drawn, asking who else was in the house. She said her husband and 2 children were inside, and they escorted her out of the house. The video shows an agent entering the house with his gun drawn, calling for her husband to come down the stairs. When an agent told her to calm down, Jones said, he just pointed a gun at my children. Well, okay. FDLE spokeswoman Gretel Plessinger said in a statement confirming the seizure of confirming the seizure of computer equipment at Jones's Tallahassee home, and said agents are investigating. Let's see. There's this from the Department of Law Enforcement. Ms. Jones refused to come to the door for 20 minutes and hung up on agents. Apparently they called ahead of time? Is that what they're trying to say? I don't know. Or maybe they couldn't get her to answer the door and then couldn't answer the phone. Plessinger said when agents arrived, they knocked and waited 20 minutes for Jones to answer. So that's a far cry from kicking the door down, which is what people were talking about. Ms. Jones refused to come to the door. 20 minutes, that usually doesn't last when the cops are really mad. After several attempts and verbal notifications, the law enforcement officers were there to serve a legal search warrant. Jones eventually came to the door and allowed agents to enter. Jones's family was upstairs when agents made entry into the home. The investigation is active, she said. As in all cases, our role is to determine the facts of what happened and blah, blah, blah. And that's what we're trying to do here. Jones was, of course, fired for insubordination in May. Let's see. Her tweets yesterday or on Monday where they took my phone and the computer I use every day to post the case numbers in Florida and school cases for the entire country. They took evidence of corruption at the state level. They claimed it was about a security breach. This was DeSantis. He sent the Gestapo. All right. Department of what? Health? Yes. Said recently that someone hacked the emergency communications channel. Jones told a reporter that she's not the hacker. I don't know how to do that stuff. Okay. That'll be interesting. The FDLE affidavit for the search warrant said a special agent spoke to a DOH official with the Preparedness and Response Office about a suspected breach of the custom-made communication system for emergency management. An unidentified subject gained access to the system and sent out a group text saying, quote, "It's time to speak up before another 17,000 people are dead. You know this is wrong. You don't have to be a part of this. Be a hero. Speak out before it's too late." Well, sounds like it could have been her anyway. Anyhow, the text message was sent from the ESF8 mail account to 1,750 recipients before the software vendor could stop the message from being transmitted further, the affidavit said. The ESF8 account is the state's emergency support function for public health and medical services and is used by many people from several agencies, including DOH and emergency management. Once they are no longer associated with ESF8, they are no longer authorized to access the multi-user group, the FDLA affidavit said. All authorized users, use the same username and passwords. That's going to make it tough. The FDLE investigator claims he determined through his investigative resources that an Internet Protocol, or IP, address, yes, okay, associated with Jones's Comcast account was the source of the ESF8 text message. That doesn't sound so good for her, does it? An IP address identifies, of course, the location that an Internet connection was made, but doesn't prove that Jones sent the text message, according to IT experts. Jones told a reporter for the USA Today network that her sources at DOH told her an email had gone out across the department from the ESF8 email account around the time that 5 of 8 team leaders had been fired. Jones told the reporter that a series of firings and resignations in DOH, including recently departed Public Information Officer Alberto Moscoso's departure, were a purge. It's like a massacre. And those aren't the only people that have been fired or left, she said. Jones also said she has backups of the data and files that power her websites that were stored on the seized hardware. And this is what happens to scientists who do their job honestly, Jones tweeted. This is what happens to people who speak truth to power, which, quite honestly, for me is a bit of a trigger that tells me when people are in trouble and they say, well, all I'm doing, I was arrested for telling the truth. I'm usually, let's see what the authorities say you were arrested for. I did see yesterday, we should look at Rebecca Jones's Twitter account. I think we can find, her Twitter stuff is embedded in the story here. Rebecca Jones tweets under the handle of Geo Rebecca, and her Rebecca is spelled Rebekah, in case you want to follow along. Yesterday, she was tweeting something that led me to believe in my quick read of it, that the affidavit was sworn out and brought to a judge who was apparently, brand new, like within a month or so, brand new to the bench in Florida. But more to the point, she was claiming that he was working in the, in the civil division rather than in the criminal division. And it wasn't even a criminal court that they brought this affidavit to and got a search warrant out of. I don't know whether Florida divides its judiciary that way or not. I don't know. It raised an eyebrow, but the whole thing kind of raises an eyebrow. I'm getting the sense that although this is very heavy-handed, it may be the case that Rebecca Jones wants to tell a more dramatic story than might actually be happening here. So a little bit of a warning for you on this story. I'm just not 100% sure that we're getting the, the level of candor and truth about it from an interested party that we might hope for elsewhere. Okay, so just keep an eye on that as we do with everything happening in the courts these days. I don't know, pretty good setup for what's happening elsewhere. It's crazy days. So we'll talk with Armando after this break about what is going on the Supreme Court level, and of course Trump hoping to get to the Supreme Court and actually be able to make an argument at some point. Not clear at all that opportunity will be available to him. All right. Oh, yes, and it's not even the craziest things I've seen circulated here. We got an awful lot to get through. Maybe we can ask Armando for his comment on I don't know, is it news? Does it qualify as news? I saw this the other day, and then I've had a couple of you bring it up. How come this hasn't made the show? I have this report from Yahoo News via NBC. Aliens exist, and Trump almost let it slip. This according to apparently an Israeli professor and former space official who even knew about the Israeli space program. Not me, but maybe we can find out a little bit about it at some point later in the show. Trump knew about the aliens and managed to keep it a secret. I find that harder to believe than the aliens themselves. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. I feel like I ought to just at least make mention of the whole Trump knew about the aliens thing, but don't know if we have to go any deeper into it than that. But now, unless that's, it could turn out to be on Armando's agenda as well, the appearance of aliens and the close hold of that secret somehow between Donald Trump and the former Israeli Space Agency head. I had no idea about this, but
it's relevant to discussing the courts because the next court that Trump is going to go to is the Galactic Supreme Court. Right.
You thought there was no appeal from the Supreme Court, but it turns out there is if you need one. You can always take it to the aliens who always know best. I don't know. Anyway.
It'll look like that Star Wars scene with the big moon.
Right. Well, yeah. Wow. I hadn't thought about that. The way the Senate is oriented in the age of COVID, though. My goodness, I would not want to attend the Galactic Senate or whatever they called it at that point.
I think it's some type of Senate. Yeah.
Yes, right. Well, they call it. Although I guess you could say, well, it looks like there might be 6 feet in between those pods they were floating in, but I don't know. Still. It's an indoor space, and
right,
it's just
floating pods.
Generally, right. This is how democracy dies. Not with a something, but with they said to thunderous applause, but I would say to a hacking cough probably as well. No word on whether the aliens are going to intervene in this thing. I guess I'll throw out one more item just as a correction from yesterday. Since yesterday was Safe Harbor Day, this will help us transition into the discussion of the courts. Since yesterday was Safe Harbor Day, we mentioned it, and in just breezing past it, I was thinking, I don't think I knew the actual origin of the Safe Harbor provision, this doctrine, and all I could think of was, well, I know it was relevant to it was brought up in the Bush v. Gore case, but I don't think they invented it for this case. So where did it come from? But as it turns out, that was covered in a New York Times primer on the piece, saying, just so you're all aware, the Electoral Count Act of 1887 is the original source of the Safe Harbor provisions, which I don't see any indication anybody's attempting to actually undermine those in particular, but just ignoring them and brushing past them in attempting to continue in the courts. All right, so what are the Trump elite strike force, which all has COVID, apparently, which is amazing, but they weren't elite enough to get a hold of any N95 respirators, but they continue on. And by the way, Sidney Powell, though now supposedly disassociated from the elite strike force, she also continues on with her cases I forget which one she's handling. But, okay, we have that, and we have the Texas case that was filed yesterday, which so far the best analysis of why this case would be brought, because it's so ridiculously weak, is that Ken Paxton is under federal investigation and looking for a pardon, and thinks that if he impresses Trump with his aggressive, though stupid and inapposite action in court, he might be able to get on the pardon list. That's as good an explanation as I've heard for that suit. And Pennsylvania's motion, or not the state. The state was opposing the motion, but Pennsylvania Congressman Mike Kelly.
Mike Kelly and Sean Parnell, who lost to Connor Lamb, were and a bunch of actual Pennsylvania representatives who won under the system were challenging their own election.
Right. So they made a motion for an emergency injunction before the court, which was just denied in one sentence, which is it's not like it never happened, but it's more than deserved, but a little unusual. You usually get a little bit more discussion than that, even when your case has no merits. But this one, I imagine that they must have given some brief thought to say, should we stay in here? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Oh no, that's very unbecoming. So we'll just say no. Yeah.
Now, before you get to even, let's start with that case, which is the one that caught the headlines. Now, remember, as Trump himself made clear this morning, that wasn't his case, because the reality is he doesn't have many cases.
That's true.
And in fact, in a subsequent tweet, he says they're going to intervene in a lot of other cases. I said, well, why aren't you filing your cases for yourself? Why are you intervening in other cases?
He should be, and he should be arguing them himself as well. He's a great orator.
Exactly. But to start with this, the one that was disposed of yesterday by the Supreme Court, what it actually did was deny an application for an emergency application for an injunction pending appeal because it wanted to block or have the Pennsylvania certification of electors decertified while their appeal was going on, which is extraordinary in and of itself as a request. Like, the status quo is as a certification, and generally when you're on appeal, you want to hold the status quo. Here they wanted to actually have an injunction that reversed the status quo. The thing that, just to give you an example, in 2000, when Bush v. Gore, the court did issue a stay order, right? The status quo was in Florida, they were beginning a statewide recount.
Right. Okay.
And the court said, no, stop right there, because as Scalia famously said, George Bush doesn't deserve to have a cloud over his election, which, of course, he did.
Yeah, that's weird.
Most
Didn't work
particularly because the Supreme Court stopped the recount. But that's, the cloud was actually created by Scalia and his cohorts. If they had gone through it and Bush had stayed ahead after the recount, well, then people would have said, fine. He lost. Yeah. Gore had lost, but they didn't want to take that chance. So they stopped the recount, and Bush was ahead on the certified vote. And, of course, Bush became president. Here, one of the things that's really interesting and fantastic to me, to my way of thinking, is that Republicans are hoisted by their own petard of what happened in Bush v. Gore. And in fact, one of the things that was important about Bush v. Gore, which it tried to say is just for this one time, which is just ridiculous. Right. You don't issue opinions that are for one time. Either you believe them and they apply all the time, or they don't. Or you distinguish them from that situation from a different situation based on whatever reasoning you can do that with. But the thing that was key to Bush v. Gore was, in fact, what you started this discussion, which was the safe harbor.
Okay, right.
They had to stop the Florida recount, they said, because the safe harbor would be violated. And Florida, of course, would want to have the safe harbor. And if you violate the safe harbor, said Rehnquist, you've destroyed the Florida election scheme designed by the Florida legislature, and that's what Article 2, Section 1 doesn't let you do.
Okay.
So now they're stuck with that. And yesterday was a safe harbor day.
Yes, it was.
And any change to the certifications now, after December 8th, would eviscerate every state's safe harbor. Now, what is the safe harbor? I think I think you know what it is, but just to recount, sure it is that the determination made by the state on the safe harbor date, if they've done it through their state processes, is conclusive. That is, it can't be challenged. Now, it so happens that who enforces that anyway is a big question. I actually think it would be justiciable. But, Democrats did do something that, in my view, violated the safe harbor in 2004, or actually January 2005 is when they did it. But it was for the 2004 election when they objected to the Ohio slate of electors. I don't know if you recall, yes. David, you probably do. Fraud and this and that and the exit polls. And it was a whole bunch of hoo-ha. And we at Daily Kos had a big fight about it. And
that's true.
Most of us said, this is ridiculous, stop. And we're not going to let you do it here. We censored,
yeah.
so to speak. Because it's hoo-ha, and it's frankly damaging to democracy. Now, see, that's one of the things that I think is one thing that maybe we never got enough credit for. Or maybe we're just that stupid when we lost the election in murky circumstances.
Yeah.
We complained about voter suppression and this and that, but we didn't say, well, the count was wrong and there was fraud. And then when people did, we shouted them down. When Republicans lose, frankly, not even a close election with much, in Ohio, at least it was one state. And if you could have flipped that state, Kerry would have been president in 2004. And obviously in 2000, Gore, it was Florida.
Yes.
And
same objection was made then in January as well.
Yeah, but there was no senator. Yeah, there was. But what happened in 2004, why I would think it was closer to a problem, is Boxer joined the objection. And everybody said, well, we're not really challenging the elector. We're just making a point. Well,
okay.
That's not how you make points. You should conform with the law. And nothing happened. The respective bodies, the House and Senate, divided, and they voted down the objection, and that was that. In 2000, they didn't even have to do that because the senator didn't join. So as Gore famously said, as everyone saw in Fahrenheit 9/11, does any senator join? No senator joined. They said, well, your objection is overruled. Boom.
Yep.
So that's not going to happen this time, by the way. This year, Republicans are certainly going to object, and there will be senators, and they will have to divide. And it really doesn't get Trump anywhere because, again, you referenced the Federal Electoral Count Act, and it basically everyone knows what the result will be because here's how it works. They divide. And the House, because it has more Democrats, will overrule the objection. The Senate probably will overrule it too because you've got Romney and Murkowski and Collins and a lot of these people. So it'll probably vote to overrule. But say they didn't and somehow the Senate upheld the objection. Well, then there's a whole process by which you determine who's right. And the next step is, the winning the certification of actually someone would probably vote Section 5, but even if you think Section 5 doesn't apply, the next section, which I believe is 15, that is relevant, favors the certification by a governor. And since there's really no other certifications except that would, in theory, lead to the electors being seated anyway. So I can't believe we're even talking about this because this election really isn't close. But not close like that. It didn't come down to one state or 500 votes or a big single issue that you can hang your hat on. But Jim Jordan's going to object, and Louis Gohmert's going to object, and every other idiot goes. They have 50 idiots that will object.
Yes.
And we talked about this before. They could take their time and object to each state and make it last 7 days. Because there's there's something in the provisions that doesn't make sense to me because there's a time limit of 2 hours per body, 2 hours in each body to debate. But everybody gets 5 minutes to debate. And I just did the math. And there's 435, and let's say only 200 of Republicans speak. That's 1,000 minutes. That's a lot more than 2 hours. So I think someone who wrote the law wasn't very good at math.
Or they were a seasoned parliamentary hand, where 2 hours in parliamentary time is something entirely different.
Well, that could be too. Well, anyway, if it's really 5 minutes per. There's no way it can be done in 2 hours if everybody wants to speak. So I don't know how that goes. And, it's just dumb. But
it may just be there's an overall cap, and anybody speaking within the 2 hour cap gets up to 5 minutes. You can't speak for 6 out of the 120 minutes.
All right, but again, what if 435 want to speak?
Yeah, then you just say, "Shut up, everybody." I don't know. It depends. I guess it's.
So I don't understand how that works, but at any rate,
they may just let it go.
Without getting into all the murky details, that's not a path that's going to work for Trump at all.
It doesn't make him
under the Electoral Vote Count Act. So what's left? Who knows? But what Trump is saying now is, all those other lawsuits that he lost, those or his allies lost, those weren't the real lawsuits. He wasn't even a part of this Hokomani, Pennsylvania one, though his elite strike force team is really saying, but the case hasn't been dismissed because it was only a ruling on the emergency application. But the problem with that argument is that the plaintiffs in that case, Kelly and Parnell and them, actually never filed a cert petition yet. So there is no case pending there. I assume they will eventually file one, but
kind of out of time.
I'm not sure what the point is. And if they ask for an expedited consideration of their cert petition, what does that even mean? The Electoral College is going to vote in 5 days.
Yeah. 14th is their date.
Right. So, they keep saying, January 20th is the actual date. Well, I don't know of the mechanism by which the Electoral College vote is overturned, except in Congress, I guess, could say, this is the thing that's so weird to me. Even the Electoral Count Act and all this other stuff. The Constitution says the Electoral College is how we select the president. There doesn't actually include mean, unless I'm misreading it, doesn't include a provision where Congress gets to count the votes.
The vote, the electoral votes, or the other vote?
The Electoral College votes.
Okay. Yeah, right. No, I mean, there's no.
I mean, maybe it's in the 12th Amendment now. I mean, I guess that's maybe where it ended up. But I'd have to double check that. But it's Congress makes laws to regulate elections, so I guess that's how they have the power to have this moment where they count the votes. The whole process we've both talked about. Well, here's the certification for Alabama.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth. But I don't know what constitutional power the Congress would have to. I mean, they've given it to themselves, I suppose, but it's never been tested. But what happens? The Electoral College convened in the different state capitals across the country. They voted.
Right.
All that was submitted according to the Electoral Count Act. That's why you have to send things to the National Archivist. Archivist, excuse me, is the proper pronunciation.
Okay.
And in fact, later, after the Electoral College votes, each state has to send the result of their vote to the National Archive. All right. So that's there's two different certifications that are sent by the states. The first is who are the electors, and most of the states have done that. So notice this morning, I saw that Nevada's got in yesterday. Again, by the way, the arrival at the archive isn't necessary for the safe harbor. The safe harbor just needs a certification to have been executed, though it does pretty clearly, in my view, require that it arrive before December 14th. So all these states that are taking their time need to speed it up. But
I mean, have you seen what's happening in the post offices lately?
Yeah, I always get nervous about stupid stuff like that. I'm like, it's in the mail, but then what happens?
Right. That's serious. We've mentioned before, there's a statutory requirement that these certificates be mailed by registered mail in the USPS. So I was, the wacko fantasy situation here is one of Louis DeJoy somehow, eating all the certificates. I don't know what happened. I mean,
and then you have a 3 USC 1 problem. Hey, they didn't arrive.
Right.
So you didn't comply with the law. Ergo, you didn't pick electors. Ergo, your state legislature gets to pick them under 3 USC 2. I trust that's not going to be the situation. But who knows? At any rate. What is Trump now saying? He's saying this big Texas case. Now, what is the big Texas case? I don't know if you talked about it already. But,
just a little. Yesterday.
All right. So, it's Texas versus Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. I think they got Nevada too, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But I know they got the other 5. And they're suing under a provision in the Constitution that provides the Supreme Court exclusive and original jurisdiction to hear disputes between the states. Now, you do know there have been cases that have been, in essence, where the Supreme Court's the trial court that involve water rights and things like that, where states are competing in that sense. And the Georgia-Florida had a big case that came down a few years ago. I forget. I don't know if it was boundary line, but they were arguing about who owns something.
Right. New York and New Jersey have done it over Liberty Island, Ellis Island, things like that in the middle of the Hudson River.
And what's the theory of having the Supreme Court do? Well, the idea is every other court will be in a particular state and they're going to be biased, but the Supreme Court won't be. Which, okay, good luck with that. But anyway, that was the brilliant founders who never made any mistakes except all of them.
Right.
Came in. So what is he saying? This Paxton guy, who you're right, is probably just fishing for a pardon, but let's pretend this is a serious thing for a second. They basically clumped in every Kraken case in every other case that they have, and just did a complete omnibus allegations of what every case has. It's 112 pages or some crazy thing like that.
Yeah. Okay. So any theory that was out there.
So why do they get to sue other states? Well, their argument is, hey, Constitution says I can sue other states, and I go to the Supreme Court. And then there's a provision 251, and there's a Supreme Court rule. There's 28 U.S.C. 251, I believe is the number, but it's a number like that, close enough. That says the Supreme Court will have exclusive jurisdiction over disputes between the states. So what is the dispute between the states here? Texas says that those states did it all wrong, and they violated state legislatures' manner of doing it by changing rules and yada yada, whatever. Everything that's been said in all these other cases. Some are kind of contradictory. Like the whole problem with the Pennsylvania case that was thrown out is actually the Pennsylvania legislature did enact the law that they were challenging. And they say, but they can't do it by violating the Constitution of Pennsylvania. And I said, well, why would you say that? Well, there's cases, Smiley v. Home, which said it one way, but then Bush v. Gore said it a completely different way because they said the Florida Constitution can't trump Florida election code, and you can't change a dot. And then, of course, there's a case called the Purcell, which does the Purcell principle, which said even before the election, but if it's too close, even if it did violate some law, you still can't change the rules because it's too close to the election. So, it's impossible to believe that you can change them after the election for the same reason that you couldn't change it before the election. So there's just a million reasons why that was no good. So, but what is okay, let's pretend there was fraud and all these changes happened that violate Article 2, Section 1, pursuant to the Rehnquist concurrence in Bush v. Gore and Kavanaugh's little spiel in the Wisconsin case when he stopped the extension of the absentee ballot deadline.
Yes, right.
Okay, let's say all that's true. Why does Texas get to complain about these violations? What's their standing? What's their interest? And they say, well, our interest is we're a state and our electoral votes are being cheated because we voted for the winner and these guys cheated, therefore that's my standing. Well, that obviously, I mean, it just isn't standing. Standing is, beyond the most, it is, even if you had a generalized injury argument, which you don't, you have to have a particularized injury argument. That is, the person who could argue it, frankly, and mostly is Donald Trump, and he'd have to do it through the state processes because otherwise you're going to change the way the legislature did it. Now, I actually believe one of the things that why Bush v. Gore is so bad and so dishonest and so corrupt is the equal protection argument that they sort of hung their hat on was, frankly, a change to the manner prescribed by the Florida legislature.
Okay.
And the safe harbor that they were trying to save, they destroyed, if you wanted to be accurate about it, because the Florida legislature put in a system of contests that allowed people to seek reversal of the election results. And they stopped it. And there was nothing in the Florida election code that said, oh, and by the way, it has to happen before the safe harbor's open.
Okay.
So they just basically changed the manner, not the Florida Supreme Court, the United States Supreme Court. They violated Article 2, Section 1 by imposing this method and imposing the Equal Protection Clause after the fact on how Florida had chosen to do it. Again, that's the whole Purcell problem. But what's left? So Texas is going to make, and whoever, Tennessee and Arkansas and Missouri, whoever else is going to join this stupid thing.
Are they? Okay.
Well,
they say they may. Okay.
They say they may. Certainly, their attorney generals are making noises.
Okay.
How they get to act for the state is something I'm not sure about. Some states let attorney generals just file on behalf of the state, I guess, but I would think there generally should be more than just one constitutional officer deciding he's going to file on behalf of the state.
All right.
I know, for example, in Iowa,
okay,
that doesn't work that way, but I'm not
I can imagine
familiar
that
with
some
it.
states might. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's leave it here. Texas apparently did it right for whatever reason. The governor, I think, is part of the suit as well, I think, but I'm not. Let's assume for the sake of argument, everybody's doing that part of it right.
Yes, filing. The right part is filing. Okay.
Right. So do they have a right to sue? Well, they're moved for leave to sue. So why do they move for leave to sue? Because the Supreme Court, United States, says they have discretion to not hear these cases.
Okay.
And they turned down a lot of cases. Most recently, there was a case where Nebraska and what's another state next to Colorado? Well, there were two states next to Colorado, Nebraska and somebody, who sued Colorado for legalizing marijuana.
Oh, okay.
And, they made some argument about what their particularized interest, and it, at least it was somewhat plausible in that they were right next to Colorado, and therefore they were spreading, decadent marijuana use across the border.
Sure. There could be plenty of them.
At least there was a particularized argument there. At least
yes.
It didn't say it didn't come.
Here's
from,
what's hurting us. You may be wrong about that, but that's what you think.
A state 1,000 miles away. It's it has something to do with us.
Yes.
And the court declined to hear it, but Thomas and Alito actually dissented on a technical reason. They believe that the jurisdiction is mandatory. That is, there is no discretion to turn it down. You have to take it, and then if you dismiss it, you dismiss it, but you have to, in essence, recognize what's called subject matter jurisdiction. That is, that you do have subject matter jurisdiction. And break time.
Yeah, right. But that's okay. We got a couple seconds. But so basically okay, so was their theory that you take every one of these cases? If you want to dismiss it right away, you can, but you have to take it. It seems like an easy way to tie the court up in knots, but, if it's going to have an automatic dismissal, fine. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Armando's still with us. I'm going over the tangled history of original jurisdiction in the Supreme Court for disputes between the states. So, these things have happened before. Texas has a novel theory this time, and I guess at best you could say they're depending on the Thomas and Alito minority opinion that the Supreme Court has to take any case that one state files against another, even if they want to dismiss it later, that it's mandatory jurisdiction, which seems like something that the court would never really want to impose on itself, which is, I guess, why there were 7 others who said, to hell with that. That's stupid. We're not going to... I don't know whether they came out and said it, but they must have thought it at the moment.
And it's 200 years of Supreme Court precedent on treating it as discretionary. I do, just to defend them a little bit, I do think that's a fair reading of the statute and the Constitution, because if you have original jurisdiction, and this is the only place I can sue you, can you really turn me down as having an opportunity to sue? Then where do I go for redress? I guess you could argue, between states, go fight it out in the Congress, and have Congress come up with laws and presidents sign them, and that's how you go win in the political arena. But that doesn't seem fair to like a little state versus a big state. But at any rate, it is what it is. But assume it's mandatory for the sake of argument.
All right, why not?
What do you have to do once you're in there? Well, it's interesting, and I learned something new this morning. That in 1966, Delaware sued all the other states.
All the other states, okay.
All of them, the other 40, and the District of Columbia.
You're all under arrest.
For their method, well, I guess maybe they didn't sue Nebraska and Maine at the time, though because they did it by congressional district. But they made this argument, which was basically an attack on the Electoral College, but they knew they couldn't take on the Electoral College directly because it's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
But they basically went from Baker v. Carr remember Baker v. Carr's the one man, one vote thing, which went to the issue of congressional districting, and said that having unequal districts in terms of population violates the fundamental due process and your right to vote, because if you can can dilute my vote from being worth basically the same as the person next to in the next district, then you've violated my constitutional right, and therefore you have to basically have districts that have roughly the same amount of voters.
Yes. Okay.
And they say, well, since that is now the principle, and Baker v. Carr was a 1964 case, if that's the new law of what the Constitution requires, well, then you have to design your electoral electoral college apportionments in the same way. And they argued that the court should make each state choose to apportion their electoral college votes by the results of the popular vote.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the court didn't hear the case. And it's actually an interesting mental exercise to think of it. What if it wouldn't be a popular vote thing, but it's not a bad idea of how to fix, if you have to live with an electoral college, it's not a bad way to have to fix it, which is, okay, you want a state 50 to 49. And it makes it more like, the primary systems for the parties, right? Where they have to divide. And then, of course, they're weird numbers. So, can you put a 15% threshold like you do in the primaries and stuff like that? And then what do you do? What if you have 5 and the result is 60-40? Well, it's easy. One gets 3, one gets 2. But what if it's 70-30?
Right. Rounding.
When does it go to 4? When does it go to 1? Anyway, I'm digressing, and I apologize for that. I just wanted to let you know that somebody had sued a different state in 1966 about their manner of selecting electors.
All right.
The court didn't take it up. No opinions are written. Nobody knows anything. So it has happened before, though. It has happened in a more generalized way. It was a thought experiment, so to speak. It wasn't like, we were upset about the result. And it was done in 1966. Remember, it wasn't done in the heat of an election. It was sort of 2 years before the next one. So plenty of time before the next election. If the court had rendered an opinion and said, no, you're right, you got to do it that way, states. And you got 2 years to figure out how to do it.
No latches problem here.
Right. There's clearly limitations on what states can do for seeking the manner. Well, I don't know if it's clear, but I believe it's logical. Certainly there's no necessarily case law. Like you couldn't, a state legislature couldn't exclude, for the sake of argument, this is the hypothetical people always use, you can't just say only white people can vote for presidential elections.
Yes. Right, okay.
Or only men can vote. If you're going to have a vote, you got to let every eligible voter vote. It would seem impossible for that not to be a requirement. Okay, so, but who would get to sue on that? Are people who have standing. If a woman was excluded from voting, she would get to sue.
Yeah. Not,
frankly, another state. This actually is a pretty good illustration of the standing problem that Texas will have. Texas's argument is that the way other people select their electors somehow harms them. Well, it may, in a generalized way, harm them. But in a particular way, no one's challenging their electors. They get every right they have will be respected. They get to submit their 35 or 38 electors to Trump.
Yeah. They just didn't win the election, so they feel like, if you guys, if in their view these other states cheated in some way, that is to say, not that they changed the vote totals, but that they're a method of permitting people to vote, whether it's extending early voting hours or mail-in ballots or drop boxes or what have you, and you therefore allocate your electoral votes to Biden. Well, we allocated ours to Trump, and now Trump isn't going to be president, and he would have been if you guys had adopted our rules of conducting the election, which is, Maybe there's an injury in there, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't say that every state, legislature shall determine it subject to Texas's approval. So long as it matches Texas, your legislature will be just fine. But I don't know. I mean, other than saying we lost, I don't know what their injury would be.
Okay, well, what's the violation? We can go from there. They talked about it. Say the violation is you violated equal protection because of different cure periods and different ways of voting that made it unequal. Now, they don't get to make that argument because they don't get to vote in those states' elections. All right, so you understand that that can't be the injury, in my view, because the state of Texas doesn't get to vote in Pennsylvania elections. A voter might have standing and say, well, just remember the case that Giuliani brought about the different counties in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And how some sent notifications for curing and some didn't. And they sued the ones that did, as opposed to the ones that didn't.
Yes,
I don't know if you remember that.
I do, yeah.
And all the judges said, I don't know why you're suing these counties. You should be suing the counties that didn't let you cure. They're the ones that denied you the right to vote, theoretically, by not letting you cure your signature or your ballot or whatever the problem was.
Right, but he was just suing over the differences in the rules, and I get the idea. And it's not a terrible.
The remedy they sought was to throw out all those ballots that were cured, as opposed to let me cure and accept my ballot, which is what they obviously should have done. But
yes, but they don't.
But that wasn't the purpose. Wasn't to vindicate any voting rights. It was to again, it's Trump's. Trump's. Tweet that I sent you actually on Twitter, but you should read that one because it's pretty funny about all criteria met. In the Texas case, all criteria met. What the hell does Trump know about criteria except he has one criteria?
Someone said,
declare me the winner. Criteria. This is the case that can get me declared the winner, and actually, in theory, it could. It includes enough electoral votes to be flipped. That would
they sued enough states.
They could declare him the winner.
Well, would they declare him the winner, or would they say that we're invalidating the electoral votes of these states, and so no one got a majority, and the House has to do its work? Is that the aim? Or
no, I would think that the state would then be able, the state legislatures, if let's say they did that and said all these results are invalid.
All right.
Well, I think that a court could do a few things. Number one, they could say, "Hey, and we now declare that Donald Trump won those states, and you have to give his electoral votes." Now, that seems far-fetched even for the most egregious Supreme Court, but I guess that's something that they could do. But what would be a more reasonable remedy, I believe, and what they probably, and it is specifically what Texas is asking for, is that it be returned to the state legislatures pursuant to 3 U.S.C. Section 2 because there was no electors ascertained on the date of the election. And that's literally what 3 U.S.C. Section 2 allows them to do.
Mm-hmm.
So they could do that as a remedy if the Supreme Court ever did this. We're all talking, this is all delusional fantasy land. I'm just trying to lend some logic to this delusion. So that would probably then go back to the Pennsylvania and Georgia and Arizona and Wisconsin and Michigan legislatures, which are all Republican, and they would presumably select the Trump slate of electors and have it submitted.
Right.
And then Congress on January 6th would recognize that slate of electors.
Okay.
Though Democrats would not, obviously. So,
right.
But against the Congress, that would be, we would have a civil war if that happened. There just is no doubt that there would be a civil war if something like that happened. Can you imagine January 6th, the Democrats don't accept them? At that point, I don't know what the Republican Senate would do. And it'd go back to the Supreme Court again, and they'd say, "Well, you have to decide what are the right electors."
I guess
and we'd
so.
be in 1876 all over again.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. I suppose one settlement, of course, is they could say, well, look, we're never going to be able to settle which slates of electors are correct, but it does leave us without any candidate having a majority of the 538 electoral votes, and so the House will select the president.
By state
right.
delegations, and we'd lose that. And Trump
right.
win
That was
that.
So that was
we'd have
the original aim of this whole thing.
Well, yeah, and I guess
maybe that's why they believe in the Texas.
This would be, I don't even know what to say. If that happens, I mean, forget it. Do buy a gun. It's going to be a civil war.
Don't buy it.
I can't
Just
imagine.
Steal it.
People would secede.
Yeah, right. Well,
seceding from
I guess, right? There's just it would be an incredible scene, to say the least. But yeah, I mean, that's been the aim, I guess, all along, was that Trump figured if there's just a way to get it to where we invalidate enough electoral votes, and I guess that's the real most cynical way of looking at it is we're not interested in vindicating anyone's right to vote. We're not interested in equal protection or due process questions across states and how they count their votes, how they allow their citizens to vote. That is all, there are tools to use along the way to whatever method we can think of that will get us to where a court will recognize the invalidation of enough electoral votes that nobody has 270 so that the House can select the president voting by state delegations, because we know there are more Republican state delegations. That's where we want to get to, because they'll vote Trump, which is incredible, having lost by 7 million plus votes, et cetera, et cetera. But, we've been through that scenario just with the Electoral College the first time. Hillary Clinton, there's no reason to believe that she shouldn't have been president either, but we're used to that one. This one, of course, would shock everybody, especially as they sit there and look and see. There are still people who don't know the process, because whoever deals with this, they'd look and say, the House of Representatives selects the president? Okay, fine. It's majority Democrats. Wait a minute, they vote by what? When do they ever vote like this? What the hell is this crap? And then suddenly Donald Trump, president... and I'm just imagining out of nowhere, for no reason at all, Al Gore shows up and says, well, that's the way it is.
Says, I'm president now.
Oh, well, no, we have to respect the process, even though nobody here respected the process. And Donald Trump is president because 26 states have majority Republican representation and delegations, and that's that. It's akin to the people who are out there saying, well, Trump won more counties. Maybe he should be president.
All right. Okay. So to tie this back to this lawsuit.
Yes.
That's doesn't give you standing, saying we voted for Trump and we wanted him to win. That's not a cognizable injury. I mean, you got to put in your votes for Trump.
Yeah.
And the other states put in whoever they want. Remember, states don't even have to hold elections for the electors for president. They don't have to leave it to popular vote. The state legislature could pass a law and say the governor gets to decide who we do. Or it could say, we're going to pick a random person in the state. We're going to have a big lottery. People get to $10 a ticket. Whoever wants in, and we're going to have a drawing, and that person gets to pick.
Though then
that's
have a Republican government,
believe it or not.
Yeah, I guess. Except, I don't know. I guess that still wouldn't meet that. I was going to say, are we guaranteeing a Republican form of government here? Well, for the state, we are. I mean, the elected representatives of the state.
For the federal government.
That's true. Well, certainly not a responsibility of the states to guarantee the federal government remain Republican.
Right.
That's on somebody else.
So
who does that?
That's a fundamental problem here. You don't. There's no right. Well, once there is a right to vote created, then the voters have constitutional rights with regard to their voting rights.
Mm-hmm.
And every state in the union, of course, picks their electors by method of popular vote. Nebraska and Maine are the two states that do it by congressional district.
Yes, but it's still by popular voting in those districts.
And those districts.
Right.
So you have a right to vote. You, a citizen of those states that have chosen the popular vote method, have been given the right to vote, and now federal constitutional guarantees kick in.
Okay.
All right? But again, those constitutional rights belong to the voter, not to a different state. They don't have standing. They don't even have plausible standing to make these claims. The state doesn't have these arguments. Now, interestingly, in each of those states, Donald Trump did have standing, in my opinion. But his lawyers are so bad, they never could properly frame whatever argument they were trying to make. The one time they tried, which was in that Pennsylvania federal court case, which was a mistake, they needed to go through the state court and lose at the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania and then take a cert petition to the Supreme Court of the United States and make whatever arguments they had on it. Or whatever, generally speaking, this is, George Bush, for all his flaws, had really good lawyers. And they actually tested going through the federal courts. People don't remember this. They filed a case that made a lot of the same arguments they ended up making in the petition that ended up at the Supreme Court through the Florida Supreme Court. They made those arguments in district court in Florida, federal district court in Florida, up to the 11th Circuit. And those were dismissed as, not for a variety of procedural reasons. No one actually reached the merits. He could have done all this if he had good lawyers in every state and had filed things on time and done things properly. Could have 5 different cases with cert petitions sitting at the Supreme Court, but he never did it.
Right.
Literally,
Okay.
the Texas case, which includes all these crazy Kraken allegations, no Trump case actually makes the Dominion argument, for example. They make a lot of different arguments about, these many out-of-state voters and this many signature problems, and this many were because of change in the absentee deadline. There were a bunch of those. Generally, those didn't add up to enough votes. Like for Michigan, they simply don't. There's not enough at stake there for them. They lost by 150,000. There's no way they could ever really. It goes back, but take the ones that are closer. Even Pennsylvania's hard. It's 85,000 or whatever, so that one's going to be hard too. But take Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia, which were the 3 closest, right?
All right.
Wisconsin was 21,000. Arizona was 12, and Georgia was 12. And you put those 3 up there, and you argue that the change in the rules violated Article 2, Section 1. You put yourself sort of in a Bush v. Gore situation with 3 states, not 1, but at least, it's something familiar to the Supreme Court. And in fact, they sort of laid the groundwork pretty well with Kavanaugh's opinion in the Wisconsin case, and then there was the 8th Circuit opinion about Minnesota. There was a framework that if they had competent lawyers, it would have been wrong and bad and shouldn't happen, but it would have been within the realm of plausible, not crazy Kraken Dominion nonsense. But Trump is a bad manager. He's just not good at things.
No. Well,
you said, this was Trump's plan. Well, Trump didn't have a plan. He was just yelling.
I mean, to the extent it was a plan, it was somebody told him, if we can get it to the House of Representatives, you can win. All right, then get it there. That's the plan.
Right. I mean, and the first one was, hey, if we've stopped certification, the state legislatures can vote your elect.
Okay, good.
Well, let's do that then.
Yeah,
let me call up the speaker let me bring the Michigan guys in.
Yes.
Let me yell at Brian Kemp that he needs to have a special session. But, he didn't start that immediately. It took him like a month to figure it out, right?
Right. Well, he didn't know any of this stuff. Somebody told him. Right. I think that was the process. If we could just invalidate enough electoral votes that the House of Representatives flips the result, then we can win. Okay, do that. Well, let's see. In order to invalidate the results, we got to here are these theories. All right, then I adopt all those theories. And then in the end, they finally had to say, well, also, I think the only thing that'll get us across the line here is if we also say all the voting machines switched votes. They were all meant to vote for you, but they got counted for Biden. So we have to throw that in there or else we don't make it. All right, then I believe that.
Can we take a minute just on that one? Because it's just a blatant lie. The argument about, yes, they made what they called the evidence of this was a county in Georgia called Ware County where a human screwed something up and 37 votes for Trump were columned because somehow these things work in columns, somehow ended up with Biden. Then they caught it and they fixed it. Okay. But that was a human error. It wasn't Dominion. It wasn't anything. No. And it was proven that not true. It's just like the stupid suitcase story. Right. And in Atlanta at the wherever they did the counting in Atlanta. Right. And then they looked at the security footage. It's amazing. Thank God they had it. Showed when that thing arrived, when they put it under the table, why they did put the ballots in, and why they took them out. And there was a chain of custody the whole way. There was nothing nefarious at all. And it was, just election people doing what election people do when they count ballots.
Yeah. It looked like if you're there looking for nefarious, I guess you could say, well, why did you put them under the table? Why didn't you just stack them out in the open somewhere? I don't know why they decided to do that.
Well, they were using the table for counting.
Yeah, but why not have it stacked elsewhere?
Well, listen, is there a lot of things that should be done better? Yeah.
Right. So anyway, but
let's
yes,
fund elections.
They looked at these things. And Trump's still saying, just look at the tape, look at the tape. And again, if you look at the whole tape, box comes in, is put down, box picked up, box opened, votes in box counted, box closed. What?
Right. And there's the other thing that they'll.
But it's shaped like a suitcase.
Yell at is signature audits in Georgia.
Right. We've been through that.
You can't even really do it because at this point, no signature is attached to any particular ballot. So what ballots do you throw out?
Right. All of them is the answer. They know that because, that's why they're doing this thing is what they're asking for is stupid and was taken care of at an earlier stage, but they want to redo it and it can't be redone. So, it can't be redone. Then nobody gets to vote by mail in Georgia. That's not a real remedy.
Just as another aside, in the Arizona Supreme Court decision throwing out Trump's contest, they actually did an audit of signatures.
Okay.
Because they have this process in Arizona, and basically 80% everybody, even Trump's experts, said, yeah, that's fine. And then there were 20% that, they didn't say they were wrong. They just said, well, we can't really tell. Because signatures, honestly, the whole signature verification process is absurd anyway.
Right. If you've signed a touch screen in your life, you know what's going on.
There is no scientific way to check a signature.
Right. It was never a smart thing. That's a holdover of ancient times when that was all they had by way of identification. Well, signatures. Some people have fancy signatures and they're hard to reproduce. Some people don't. And
some people don't sign the same way.
Right.
Every time.
Right. Or if you've ever signed an electronic touchpad in these days, you look and say, what would they do if they had to match that?
It's impossible.
Right.
So anyway, what's left here? So this is just the grift till the 14th. I don't know. I see the Trump people are, completely gullible and will keep giving money.
Yes.
But what happens after December 14th? I actually made the argument that based on Bush v. Gore, every Democratic lawyer across the country in any of these states should immediately move to dismiss all these cases, saying the safe harbor's over. Bush v. Gore says that means it's over, so dismiss.
Yeah, that's what they'll try. And I don't know. I imagine as far as the grift goes, you say, well, help contribute to Mo Brooks's objections on the January 6th. Doesn't cost any money.
What money does that take?
I don't know. $1 billion. You just say it. And then...
I mean, he just stands up and says, I object.
Right. Well, that costs money somehow. I don't know.
Yes, apparently so. I won't do it if you don't give me money.
Right. That's perfectly reasonable. He supports Trump. Everybody knows that they'll be like that. I don't know. I guess the grift goes on, and then after that, it's like, well, we have to solve this problem before the 2024 election. So let's prepare so that we don't lose to latches. We'll be right back.
That's fine.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. True, right. Welcome back now, everybody. The show continues here. Armando's still with us. We've been discussing over the break, a couple of things. We might as well bring them up here on the air, too. One... Well, all the things that could still be live controversies, legally speaking, for Trump even after he leaves office, assuming he leaves one way or another. But okay, fine. Like as I've always been fond of reminding people, you can, of course, impeach someone once they have left office. We've been over that a number of times, and there's good reason to think about doing it. And the reason has always been that you can, among the remedies, not only removal from office, but barring people from federal office in the future. And for somebody who insists that he's getting ready to run again in 2024, that might be a useful tool, although I assume he would say, so what? Who cares? What are you going to do? Sue me. I'm going to run anyway. And then when I win, what are you going to do? And he has a point, except that I don't think he'll survive that long.
I mean, if you actually went through it, you could sue to have him thrown off the ballot because he's no longer eligible to be an office holder.
Yeah, you could do that. But again, the problem is it's not self-actuating, and you have to go and actually do the thing, which I guess is a little bit like it leads us a little bit to the other point you were making during the break about the emoluments cases. 2 points being made there. One, what the hell? The
4 years.
Facial violation of the Constitution. And we're, still scratching our heads, stroking our chins after 4 years. Can we do something about this thing? It says right here in the Constitution you can't take these emoluments, and he is taking them. I mean, that should just give you an idea of, it's a great metaphor for all of our institutions and what has held and what has not, and that it says
held.
Yeah,
that's not holding.
Yeah.
To me, that it didn't work.
Yeah,
it didn't work.
It says you can't do this, and he did do it. Oh, yeah, right.
But they still haven't answered a single subpoena from Congress.
Right, and then this one I knew before Trump came into office was a dead letter because we've been through this before. With the Bush administration, they answered some subpoenas. They broke down in the end with a couple of them, but there were definitely a few where subpoenas were still outstanding and pending when Bush left office. And some of these cases actually made it all the way through the courts and had a court say, all right, now in 2009, in the first year of the Obama administration, yes, Josh Bolton and Harriet Miers, you do have to honor these subpoenas. At which point they said, all right, we've been out of office for a year. And then of course the Congress does themselves the huge favor of saying, you know what, to hell with it. We don't want to even hear from them anymore. So we'll settle. And we think, well, as long as we were vindicated in court, that should be enough. And as it turns out, the answer is no, you absolutely had to force them. And I think Harriet Miers did show up, but then members of Congress said, we don't have anything to ask you.
We don't really have any questions anymore.
Yeah, but they should have gone ahead with it and said, and by the way, we're going to see you fined in some way for dragging this out. But now Republicans know that, Congress lasts even less time than the presidency. Presidency has 4 years, but it was at least plausible at the time, knowing how slowly the wheels of justice turn, that you say, if I just dig my heels in, I might be able to get to the point where the Congress that subpoenaed me has dissolved, and I might be able to argue that it's moot just because of that. But even so, if it doesn't work, the point is I can delay things by at least 2 years. And then it was a question of, emoluments, but that's the president. He's got a 4-year term. Can you literally dig in your heels and wait 4 years? And now we have that answer too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's
they just don't go.
Kidding aside, that's just a huge problem of the functions of the court. And it's not like they can't go fast when they want. Look how fast they've decided all these election cases.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They need to treat those things with the same urgency. And in fact, when the Republican senators start subpoenaing the Biden administration, Biden's not going to do this because he doesn't care about that, but I do, and I wish he would say, look, here's what I'll do. I won't do what Trump did if you pass a law with the House, put on my desk a new procedure for how congressional subpoenas are handled. Now, he's the president, so he doesn't want that, of course, because that's unfortunately what happens. Democrats decide when they've got and this is the truth. When they're president, they say, no, the executive power, privilege.
It's true. And although it's funny, it resides in the Office of Legal Counsel more than anything else, who view their job as protecting the prerogatives of the presidency, period. I mean, they just switch personnel along with the president. So, I mean, maybe that's the solution, right? The Republican OLC should remain in charge for a Democratic president and vice versa. But that really won't help very much. But they view it as
acceptable. And any president worth his salt should realize, you know what? Not every president's going to be reasonable and make reasonable, even if they've been unreasonable. But, the realm of what's reasonable now, you now see how bad it can go. You now see that the founders really were not very smart at all, is what I'm getting.
They certainly didn't anticipate total shamelessness.
Well, they should have, because that's why didn't they leave King George because of abuses of executive power? Wasn't that the whole point of breaking away?
Well, when you put it that way, yeah, I guess that's They didn't anticipate the things that caused them to move to rebellion in the first place. It doesn't seem likely, does it?
No. Well, a lot of things.
But Americans won't do it. We're awesome.
I understand everyone says, hey, you know what? You come up with a system that can last this long and basically kind of work. And even though it's got a lot of problems, the country, relatively speaking, is pretty good. Right. And relatively speaking, I understand. I'm not saying, I understand all the flaws and all the unfairness. I get it. I'm not saying that, but I'm just talking about from the perspective of the people who would defend the structure. And what's your great system? France had 5 republics.
Right. It's a common defense. And I mean, I guess I would say, well, suppose I came up with one and it was great. Would you argue in the future that I was infallible? Of course not.
No.
You would say, he makes mistakes just like anybody else. I was there to see him. But he did come up with a better system than these guys.
Yeah, that's exactly. You actually describe it much better than me. It's the whole founder flawlessness theory. Right. The founder said, I mean, so what?
Right. I do think about that a lot.
Complete tangent.
Okay.
The guy has to be out of the military thing for 7 years. I don't know what your position is on it, but explain why that's a good policy. Don't just tell me it's been like that since 1947. Okay, well, there were a lot of things in 1947 that weren't great. Tell me why you think it's good now.
I don't know, but I do know that I know people who look like they're making a cogent argument about it. So I would refer to them.
Yeah, I've seen them, and I didn't find them particularly cogent. But that's me, and that's for another day. To put a bow on the whole Texas thing, just because I know I tangented on you like 5 times.
That's okay.
But
it's very
what's
presidential.
left to do? On Thursday at 3 p.m., the defendant states have to file their response to the motion for leave to file.
Okay.
And they'll make all the arguments you make. And frankly, it's pretty clear that they're going to deny. I can't imagine they're going to take this case. Can you imagine? You know what a circus that would be? A trial in the Supreme Court with 9 justices. So objection.
Oh, right. Well,
objection to this, and then who decides overruled or sustained?
That would be fun. Overruled, sustained. No.
You have
Wait a
to
minute.
take a vote of 9 for each of them.
No, I mean I think the actual procedure. I think the modern procedure is they usually don't have these kinds of emergency cases. They just say they appoint a special master, and somebody else does.
Well, all right, so they could do that. Who would be the special master that could steer that case? Ken Starr.
Sidney Powell. Right, yeah.
Sidney Powell. So that happens, and I think the only drama would be, are Alito and Thomas going to dissent on their theory that I first raised with you about mandatory versus discretionary jurisdiction.
Okay.
So, and they won't. I don't think anyone's going to write on the merits. So I wish they would. I would actually. I think they don't want to have anything to do with it, and they're going to talk Thomas and Alito to keeping their mouth shut. But if they actually wrote something, because then there's this whole, well, you see, Thomas and Alito would have voted to Trump president. And what a scallywag that Coney Barrett is, and yada, yada. But I think if they don't all keep quiet, the liberals on the court should actually just do a complete teardown of the merits of the complaint.
It would be nice to see. I don't know whether they would indulge us in that, but again, the argument is a lot better if anybody wants to write a dissent, certainly, that says we should have taken the case for whatever reason, whether mandatory or not, and then begins to, all it will do is foster speculation about how they would have voted on the merits, even if they don't say.
There would be there would be certainty that Trump supporters would say they were going to give Trump the election. It's those, it's actually just for comedy on the court. The Gorsuches and Kavanaughs, to some extent at this point, Roberts is their enemy, which is funny because he's terrible. And Lou Dobbs is going crazy. He wants, the cowardly Supreme Court. And I'm hoping he's calling for impeachment of them all.
Well, we can.
I'd impeach all night. Ooh, excuse me.
Oh my God! Well, now that you're getting impeached. So,
I'm impeached.
Yeah, they could do it.
I didn't meet the criteria on that one. Sorry,
I don't
guys.
know. Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but the actual statutory regime is if you're going to impeach all of them, you got to do them. It's last in, first out. So I'm fine with that.
Jesus, that would be funny, right? All right, let's start with the last guy. Who is it? You.
Barrett, you're
Tony
up.
Barrett, out.
Yeah, well, those are the fastest moving cases. They have the least record to go over. So right. We want to just move with dispatch here. I don't want to.
Right. So I do think that'll be some drama, and I think for the sake of the institution, they probably can talk Alito and Thomas into not filing dissents on this one.
All right. Well, I guess we hope for that. Or I don't know. I guess we hope for nothing. They just say, get out of here.
Well, I mean,
they have to make some answer.
Trump being Trump, but I mean, at some point, in some sense, filing the Texas case is kind of productive for Trump in the longer term, because if the Supreme Court said they didn't cheat you out of this election by result, even though they won't say the words, you had your day in the Supreme Court, and they said no. I mean, who else then is left?
The Galactic Court that we mentioned earlier.
But you know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah.
I feel like this Texas thing in the longer term, is counterproductive for Trump. Probably good for Paxton. It'll get him a pardon. But,
right.
The answer to Trump is you said, listen, the Supreme Court saw your complaint, and they said no.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what he says after that. So I guess just for that, right, you want to say, all right, he's been running around for days now saying, oh, what's he tweeting this morning? If you take his favorite crutch, if you take a look at, I don't know what I'm talking about. If you take a look at the video, take a look at the affidavits, and I suppose if the Supreme Court says no and does so in perfunctory form, then he'll say, but I said you should take a look at it, and they didn't take a look at it, so it's invalid.
No, they did look at it. It's attached to the filing.
It's here. We saw it. Thank you.
That's actually what they're looking at is the complaint and whether they should take jurisdiction.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what you tell crazy people. What can you do? We've been over this territory before. There's no convincing,
I'm not trying to convince that group. I just, whoever's
people,
left, he said, the Supreme Court, all these people you guys love or pretend to love, on religious liberty, in quotes, cases. What's your argument about that? I mean,
right. Well, they're
cowards.
They're
cowards.
Right. They're wrong about this and that and the other thing, but they're great on religious liberty. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they do afterwards, but in the land of the lost, there's nothing to be done. You can't change the minds of Trumpers. I suppose there's a small segment of the population out there who says, well, it's not that I'm pro-Trump, it's that I believe he has the position that all the Republican senators are taking, even Mitt Romney. Well, he has every right to pursue every legal avenue. And then I guess some of those people will say, well, all the legal avenues have been pursued, and so I guess that's that. But then, I don't know. I mean, there will still be some segment of them who say, no, he was given short shrift in the Supreme Court. This is bull, and we have to, I don't know what, do it all over again, or impeach the Supreme Court, or I don't know. They convince themselves of all sorts of things.
And that's, it's
by the
majority of Republicans and 25% of the country.
I will,
and there's nothing you can do about them.
I'll throw out some other weird twists about what's happening among elected Republicans, in case you were wondering. Ultimately, do the Mitt Romneys and for that matter, Mitch McConnell's, etc. Just remember the institutionalist. You remember him, right? What do they do with this stuff, and how far will they go, and at what point will they say, look, all legal remedies have been exhausted, and that's that. Small bits of information on that front from yesterday. One from today, like I said, I mentioned that Mitt Romney, too, is saying, Mr. Voice of Reason is saying, well, sure, he lost the election, but he has every right to sue and pursue every legal option. Mitch McConnell, on the other hand, apparently yesterday, the Joint Committee on the Inauguration met yesterday, something hardly anybody knows anything about unless you just take a look at the list of all the joint committees. This is just what it sounds like. 3 senators and 3 House members. They're the party leaders from both chambers plus one random person, and split evenly because super committee style. 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, because bipartisan equals awesome. And they have jurisdiction over what? The inaugural ceremony, because it takes place on the grounds of the Capitol. So this is the committee that does stuff like, let's get a bunch of chairs and some bunting, and I will escort the president from here to there, and then we'll make sure that the Chief Justice shows up, and this will be the tickets, and this is how many tickets each member of Congress gets to pass out. All that, brass tacks stuff. They met yesterday to pass their initial resolution that basically says, okay, here we are. We're the Joint Committee on Inauguration. Who are we inaugurating? And you know that they could not pass this resolution on who was going to be inaugurated on January 20th? It was a 3-3 tie. So in case you were thinking the institutionalists eventually, no, Mitch McConnell's on that committee. He voted no on the resolution to inaugurate Joe Biden. So did Roy Blunt and Kevin McCarthy. So if you thought, at the top, ultimately there'll be some responsibility. They'll let the crazies do all this stuff. That the answer to that is no. They are participating in this. And by the way, those people, by virtue of their leadership positions, are going to be the ones who are appointing the tellers who open the certificates on January 6th. And of course, you're supposed to open it. There's a little script that you get to do things legally and properly. You open it up, you start with Alabama, because alphabetically, first person, I don't know whether it's going to be a Democrat or a Republican, but we'll open it up. There are 4 tellers, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats, 2 from the House, 2 from the Senate. They're appointed by the leadership. They open up the envelopes and say the winner is, right, like the Academy Awards. They say, in this case, Madam Speaker or Mr. President. They'll be addressing Mike Pence as President of the Senate, presiding over this joint session. And we'll say, Mr. President, the certificate from Alabama appears to be regular in form and authentic, and by virtue of that certificate or whatever the script is from here, Alabama cast its whatever number of electoral votes for Donald John Trump for president and Michael Pence for vice president. They move on, go through the alphabet. There will be objections, as we know now, to Pennsylvania, maybe all the states, but one of those tellers, what if one of those tellers is one of these guys, or is appointed by the guys who are so dumb and so obstinate that they're voting no on resolutions on who they're going to inaugurate? Now they're going to open the thing up and say, you know what, Mr. President, this isn't regular in form, and it's not authentic. The certificate of the state of Pennsylvania is BS. We throw it out, and then there's a procedure. What? Outrage. How dare you say so? And then we'll think about what to do, and we'll split into the 2 chambers, and the House will vote to accept it, and the Senate, I don't know, in Fantasyland's votes not to, and then there's the procedure that you talked about how to resolve all of that. But you might not even get to the point where somebody has to stand and make the objection. The tellers could do it. The tellers will say, this is crap. This is fake. Fake news, this certificate. I mean, the procedure is more or less the same, but I guess nobody imagined that they would do that. They would just leave it to the lunatics on the floor to object, and we know how to dispense with that. But given that the top leadership in the Republican Party is out there voting no on resolutions that say Joe Biden will be inaugurated on the 20th in their capacity as members of the Joint Committee on the Inauguration, there's not a lot of hope out there. And that, by the way, should be shoved in the face of everybody who says, Mitch McConnell's an institutionalist. Thank you. My show is over now. I just thought I would bring you up to speed on that. I guess, I don't know. There's nothing to add to that.
It's an absolute problem. And it's going to get worse. And I think of it this way. Look, while you were talking, I just took a quick look and see what Trump was tweeting about.
Oh, okay.
He said, nobody's ever won Ohio. Florida has lost the election. It's like, okay. Yeah. And I guess that's a new rule in the Constitution that if you win Ohio and Florida, you're automatically declared the president.
Right.
This is arguing.
I get the point, but there's also an octopus who picks the Super Bowl winners. But, what are we going to do? It may be true that no one has ever had that happen, but you have.
I
think he's supposed to be arguing that there's a statistical anomaly.
It's true or false. It's irrelevant.
Right. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's the sort of thing that, I don't know, might interest Nate Silver just in terms of like, okay, well, that hasn't happened. But now it has. I mean, it's not that it's impossible. It's just, I guess it's been unlikely because there's huge chunks of electoral votes in those 2 states. And if somebody wins them, then they tend to win.
Right. But things change. California used to vote Republican. Now it votes Democrat.
Yeah.
Ohio was a swing state. Now it's not.
Right.
And unfortunately for me, Florida isn't either. I mean, I can say no Democrat who won Georgia has lost ever. No Democrat who won Arizona has lost. I don't know if that's true, but I can say it.
Right. Well, it's true that you can say it. It may even be true that it's true, but yeah, I mean, this is of interest to media planners on presidential elections and no one else.
Yeah, it's just weird, but it's just the flailing is bizarre. And he keeps denying any relationship to the Pennsylvania case that got dismissed. Right. He's very upset that he's being labeled a loser on that one, which is, meanwhile, Jen Alice is out there, pumping it crazy. Up. Again, the thing is, his Pennsylvania case lost in the Third Circuit, and they still haven't gone to the Supreme Court.
Oh, well, that seems odd. I would have thought that the plan originally was, as they did with the subpoenas and as they did with the emoluments, to just say, well, the emoluments they haven't had to do it, but you just appeal, and you just keep doing it to keep the thing alive in somebody's mind. So I can't believe that they haven't done that. But
look, the day that the Third Circuit opinion came out, Rudy said, "This is great. I get to go to the Supreme Court even faster."
Yeah, and then I don't know. He got COVID, and that was that.
Well, he never was going to do it.
I mean, guess it wasn't.
And even this Texas case, that isn't their case. Oh, I'm going to intervene in this one, he says. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's wait and see. By the way, this the last thought on Texas, because I know we're running out of show, is, can an individual intervene in a state dispute? The whole idea of the original jurisdiction is that it's a state versus a state.
Yes.
And that's, would that destroy the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction if they could intervene? So I would have to think that they'd have to say, no, you can't intervene. This is between the states.
That's, I mean, I guess that's a possibility. I suppose they could invent some theory of, the state case is live and you bootstrap into it. But
my really last thought about Texas is, I wish the defendants in their thing would say, if the court is going to grant leave to file this complaint, we wish to file the attached counterclaim against Texas and all these and and third party claims against all the Republican states for all the things that we don't like that they do.
Sure, fine.
So that would be kind of funny. It also would just highlight to the court how stupid the idea of actually taking this case would be, because every election, every state would start suing every other state for their election.
I guess
systems.
So. Well, that would be a mess. But hey, let's have that fight in between elections.
Can you imagine? There'd be 100 special masters. Boy, it'd be good work to be a special master for those kind of cases.
I guess so.
Because you'd be kept very busy.
Full Employment Act for special masters. You can try these things, and I'm curious about what Trump thinks his intervention will do, and does he think, for instance, well, if you were to turn this case down, that would be messing with Texas, and as you know, constitutionally, you're not supposed to mess with Texas.
Mess with Texas.
It says it right on the Constitution stickers that I have on my car.
Well, there is, just to be fair, there is a Texas representative who just reintroduced his secession proposal to the Texas legislature. So,
excellent. Well done. Give us all that wall money back. Thank you.
Exactly.
I guess so. All right. Well, we are at a show, as it turns out. But thank you for, we had a long and lively discussion about it. We didn't get back to the aliens, but I think we can talk about that with Greg tomorrow. I'm sure.
We'll wait till Trump files in the Galactic Court. So.
Yes, and see what.
Then we can evaluate Justice Alien number 1 from Mars or whoever.
Yes, and it might not be too far-fetched to think that he could be talked into believing that that's the case. I did have another crazy...
He'll ask him for a favor. Can you do me a favor, though?
Yes, another one of his perfect phone calls. Yesterday we were comparing that. The phone calls, I think, that he made to the governors and state legislators. I'm sure he thinks those were perfect, too, just like his Zelensky call. I didn't tell him they had to do it. I asked them if they would.
He's calling Coney Barrett right now. You know that, right?
Oh, yeah, that could be. Right, come back. Maybe he's just inviting her to another super spreader party, though. We will see.
All right, man.
Okay, very
this was
good.
Fun. Thanks for letting me come on and jab.
Sure. Well, we have to speculate about these things. It would be irresponsible not to. I appreciate it. Thank you, Armando. Time now, yes, for us to sign off and hand things over to Justice Putnam. We'll cover the actual news of the day. We might as well tell you what's coming up in that respect. There's so many other little stories I wanted to get to, but that just makes the outlook for Thursday and Friday that much more fun. But how about for right now? West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up next. Let's see. We've got Biden's nominee for defense secretary, a point that Armando raised obliquely, will serve to help end the chaos. At least we certainly hope so. We'll see whether it turns out to be his original nominee or not. The rest of the show includes items like the Idaho Health Board meeting halted when Ammon Bundy's, armed anti-mask goons terrorized board members and their families at their homes. I guess that wasn't too hard to predict. And a North Carolina newspaper publisher handcuffed and ordered out of a courtroom for objecting to a lack of court access. I guess he was right.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yeah, not too surprising. I think that one turns out to be about coronavirus restrictions and a very interesting case all by itself. What else have we got? Cybersecurity firm FireEye says it was hacked. Oh, well, don't hire him. By an unnamed nation state that just happens to write in Cyrillic. Hint, hint. Stay tuned and find out who that might be next. Ukraine.